They weren't about ready to be disarmed because the police never go into those areas. They're on their own now, so they don't have any illusions. And they actually shut down the capital, Pretoria, one day, and the police were threatening some rough stuff against one of the black leaders, and he said, "Oh, good, this will look really good on the cameras. You're going to do to me what the apartheid government used to do to all of us blacks." So it looks like nothing has really changed, eh? Well, they ended up not bothering him. What they've done is to back off on implementation of laws. Well, you don't really have to have your licenses renewed for quite some time. So they've kept pushing it back because people have made it clear civil disobedience is the rule of the day, and they are just not going to go along with it. And now the whites have joined them. When I was there, and I went to one of the kickoff meetings of the governors of South Africa, this black leader had given a talk to a largely Afrikaans group, the people that had been essentially the rulers of South Africa before the current government. And as soon as this guy started to speak and to challenge them to join with the blacks in civil disobedience, refusing to obey the gun law, these guys were on their feet. They were cheering. They would have elected him president if they had the chance. It was fabulous to see that these nut jobs in the African National Congress are actually, to a considerable extent, bringing the country together, a country that has been not united and divided substantially on racial grounds. That's beginning to change because everybody realizes that the government's the problem. That's not a racial issue. It's just people with too doggone much power.
Mr. Pratt, I know that you've been following this story and been involved in it. I think our listeners would find it very interesting, and especially the fact that it's got absolutely no coverage by the mainstream press, and that is that we have an American pastor, Mr. Miles, in prison in Russia, recently sentenced to 3 years for 20 rounds of ammunition. Can you bring us up to date on this story?
Well, it's a good example of how countries with strict gun control can just arbitrarily put people in jail for what you and I realize is nothing at all. This Pastor Miles, Philip Miles of South Carolina, has been going to Russia, and I think he might have been there on some 50 different visits since the fall of the communist government. I don't think it's still pretty much communist, but at least the official communist government fell in the early 90s. He went to the airline counter in South Carolina and said, "Look, I got a box of ammo." He was going to give it as a gift to a guy with whom he'd stayed before, another pastor. This Russian pastor was a hunter as he, and it was very hard to get 300 Winchester ammunition for this rifle that he had. So he was going to bring him a box of that. And when he got to the U.S. airline counter to leave, "I got this box. What do I want to declare it. What do I do?" "Well, you don't have to do anything here. Just pay attention to what the signs say when you get to Moscow." Well, he looked for any information that he could find, and it had information about kind of like what you would see coming into our country. You can't have fruits and vegetables and stuff like that, but nothing about a box of ammunition. So he sent his bag on through the X-ray. They saw the ammo. They confiscated it and sent him on his way. So I guess he probably thought that was the end of it. But when he got back to the airport, February 3rd, they snatched him, put him in the Huskow, have given him over a 3-year sentence. And as the Moscow Times observed not long ago, this is unfathomable. Why they would give him a sentence like that when an embezzler had been convicted, a Russian, for some millions of dollars that he had embezzled, and given a suspended sentence. It's obviously something political. They're using gun control to intimidate, probably play with an American to try to get concessions from the United States. Both of the senators from South Carolina are trying to go through channels and get this man sprung. Sometime this month, there's to be an appeal heard in a Russian court, and we're hoping that maybe that'll be the opportunity for the diplomatic efforts to succeed and get him out. But if it doesn't, we've been talking to members of Congress about putting a rider on the legislation. We give a lot of money with, that's another discussion whether we should be doing it, but we give a lot of money to Russia, and we could easily put a rider on there saying, good, for every day that Pastor Miles is in jail, X number of dollars come off the amount of money that's going to go to Russia. So we have at least some means of retaliating, short of sending in the special forces to get him out of there. I would point out that once something like that happens, it spreads. Other countries see that we're not able to get the guy out right away, and they get emboldened. It's just like criminals when they realize that their victims are unable to protect themselves. So there's another case in Mexico. Private in the U.S. Army, Richard Medina, was stationed in El Paso, and he took a trip over to Juarez, the sister city, and he didn't need to take that trip over there in his car. He was going to park and then walk across one of the checkpoints into Mexico. But he took a wrong turn, and he ended up going into Mexico, and he had a semi-automatic rifle and a handgun and some ammo in his car. Well, of course, Mexicans only want the government to have guns, and of course, the government crooks. And so Mr. Medina is in a Mexican jail, and he's awaiting trial. And, God help the next American that either has some ammo or has one too many apples in his luggage or who knows what. Foreign countries are finding that, gee, you can mess with Americans and nothing happens.
Mr. Pratt, if the Second Amendment is in fact overruled by the Supreme Court, and also it's arguable that the First and Fourth Amendments have already been overruled with the Patriot Act, do you see a creation of a domino effect upon the remaining remnants of the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, I think each time that the court rules unconstitutionally, it further emboldens this attitude that they have that somehow the Constitution evolves, and they're the ones to make the Constitution evolve. They're the guiding hand for evolution. That's nonsense. That's exactly contrary to what the founders were striving to achieve. They wanted to have something that would strictly tie down the government. In fact, they even Madison talked about the chains of the Constitution that would restrain the government. The whole idea of the Constitution is to do just that. It creates the government, and it tells the government, this is what you may do, this is what you must do, and no more. And everything else that's not stipulated for you to do is reserved to the people and to the states, which is the point of the 10th Amendment. And so it's very clear, both in the text and the terms of the Constitution, as well as that 10th Amendment, that the role of the federal government is to be quite limited. Over the years, we've let politicians bribe us. They give us money for roads, they give us money for schools, they give us money for hospitals, they give us money for this, that, and the other thing. And pretty soon we come to think that we've got a right to that money, forgetting that the money going into the right pocket came out of the left pocket because there's a big hand from the federal government in that pocket taking out everything they can get so that they can give us a fraction of it back into the right pocket. Some deal.
I wanted to ask you one more question, Mr. Pratt. A lot of our listeners and American people may not be aware, because, of course, the mainstream media has done very little reporting